Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. A little bit of a change of scenery today, just because I felt like it, but today we are finally filming the video that I promised you I would film, all about how I got a first at university and just some really useful tips which hopefully you can take away and apply to your own studies, so hopefully you can get the grade you want as well. If you are new here, hi, my name's Amber. I went to the University of Greenwich and I studied events management for 4 years, graduated this year of 2020 in lockdown with a first, which honestly was all I was hoping for, so I'm over the moon about it. And there are definitely some ways and techniques and things I used to get my first which I really wanted to share with you. And I know it's still kind of early days, like it's August right now as I'm filming this, but as you'll see from my tips, I do think it's really important to get started on it early, to have a kind of mindset of what you want to expect from yourself as well as what you want to expect from your course and what to get out of your studying and things like that. So I did just want to put this out here right now, whether you're in first year, second year, third year, whether you're going into uni, or whether you're literally on the last legs, nearly finished, I think it could be useful in any sense. So hopefully you enjoyed this video and let's get started. Okay, so for my first tip, which I literally cannot stress enough, is to attend every lecture. Now I know sometimes this is easier said than done and things come up where you can't always be at every lecture, but I remember in a marketing lecture I had, they showed us the correlation between students who attended every lecture and the grade they got, and it's been proven the more lectures you attend, the higher grade you get. I don't know whether that's just because the students that attend every lecture have more of an attitude towards learning and really want to succeed and do well, which is why they're at the lectures, or whether it's just that they learn more because they're there and they have a better idea of what's expected from them during assessments and things like that. But I would definitely recommend going to every lecture, engaging as much as you can, really getting your money's worth from those lectures, because that will definitely help you out with getting your mind around what the assessments and exams expect of you, what you need to do for them, as well as just the content behind them. I think hand in hand with that goes your reading. Now I'm being a bit of a hypocrite here because I did not stick to my reading schedule at all during my whole of university. I had so many books per course and I had to read so many chapters per week for each lecture and things, and I didn't stick with it at all. I'm sure if I did, my knowledge of events and the industry would just be more rounded and I'd be a much more rounded employee and things, I'd have much more breadth of knowledge. But I only did the reading that I had to do for my essays. It was a means to an end, I only did the research that I needed to get that grade. But I would recommend trying at least to see if you can incorporate that reading in some way or another in your timetable or in your life or with work and everything else that goes into it. I personally just couldn't do it. I didn't really see a value to do it because I just didn't have the time and it would cost me far too much in social work and everything else wise, rather than just if I did the reading for that specific course. But in any way, research and reading comes into it at some point, so whether that's you space it out all throughout the weeks, all throughout your lectures, and you stick to your reading guide, or whether that's you cram it in before your essay, figure out what works for you, but definitely try and keep up with your reading. My next tip, I think some people will struggle with, especially if you're going into first year, but it is to take every assignment seriously. Now by this, obviously in first year, your essays and your grades don't count towards anything. It's kind of like a practice run in my mind. You can mess up and it doesn't matter, you can go into second year and those ones count, third year counts, first year doesn't count. So a lot of people just have a fun time in first year, have a nightlife, have a social life, living the best life they can, whilst not doing very well in their studies, and can still come out with the first sometimes. But for me personally, I took first year as a bit of a practice run. Like I said, it was a trial and error moment. I tested out a few techniques, tested out which way I study best, tested out which way I write best, and whether this kind of way of writing will get me a higher mark than this way of writing. And that really prepared me going into second year, because I knew from my first assignment due in December or whatever it was in second year, that was going to count towards my final grade. And to me, who wanted to get a first, that was really important that I did well from the start. So I had a whole year of assignments beforehand during first year where I'd been practicing and practicing and practicing to get those higher marks, taking in my lecturers' feedback, so I really knew what they expected of me throughout second year. So it just gave me a good leg up, I guess, or a good starting position to be in, because I had taken every assignment seriously, I'd done the work for them, I'd spent my time on them. I still had a great social life and nightlife, but I just really scheduled in my assignments with that. So it's hard to do, definitely easier said than done, but I think a really good technique if you are hoping to get a first at the end of it. My next tip is probably my most important one, and one I think people really struggle with, and I don't understand why. I'm not sure if it's a millennial thing or what, but it's to ask questions. Now I know a lot of people get very anxious about asking questions and like don't really feel comfortable like raising their hand in front of like 80 other people to ask a question or what have you, which is completely fine, but I do think if you are able to and you do feel comfortable enough or confident enough, maybe just try it out, ask one question in one lecture one time and see how it feels. But I always find like I learn best when I ask questions. Like I don't think there's anything wrong from being curious. Like learning is all about having your questions answered, do you know what I mean? And one of those ways to get your questions answered, sure, you can research independently and all of that, but you can also just ask your lecturer or ask the person next to you, and often they'll tell you something else that you didn't even think of, that you didn't even have the question for, but they'll just explain it in such a way or like expand upon it that you're like, oh my gosh, that makes so much more sense. I'm in such a better place to like learn about it or write about it or research about it because I have that bit of background knowledge. And I was always one for sticking up my hand. I did it throughout like my placement year, throughout my internship. I was always one to ask questions. I don't think there's such a thing as a stupid question. Obviously, I mean, if there's someone who's really busy and the question is kind of like irrelevant or like not really important in that moment, maybe hold off. Timing is always wise when you're asking a question, but if it's just like a general question about the topic or about an exam or about an essay, you don't know who else in that room is thinking the same and is also too nervous to ask that question. So personally, I would just take the bullet, you know, bite the bullet, ask that question, get your answer, and you would definitely learn a lot more from that and become more prepared and just become like, I don't know, just develop your knowledge a little bit more because you have had that confidence. But I have definitely seen the benefits from asking questions. I always feel way more prepared, and it just shows the lecturer that you're super engaged and interested in the topic, which never hurts. My next tip, if you're hoping to write like a successful essay or like a high scoring essay, is to see if you can get your lecturer to approve your essay title. Now this obviously isn't always appropriate in every course or what have you, and sometimes it's like mandatory that the lecturer see your essay title before you start writing away. But even if it's not, even if it's just like open to anyone and it's just like, oh, if you want me to check your essay beforehand, just let me know, I would always get the lecturer to just proof over it, even if it's just a change of words which changes the thinking of the essay completely, like makes it more critical or more in-depth or gives you like way more things to talk about. Think about how many essays those lecturers have read over and over again. This may be like your 10th essay you've ever written. You're not going to come up with a perfect title firsthand, and they may also be able to guide you if you're writing about something that's like maybe a little bit off topic or some of your wording makes it sound off topic. You're obviously marked for the content of your essay, so they can help you kind of reword it in a way so that it really meets the criteria and you can start hitting all those high points. I always struggled with this one personally because I'm not a big fan of criticism. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I like to think that everything I do is just the right way to do it, and it's really, really a tough pill to swallow for me to have criticism. So I did struggle with this because if a lecturer turned around and went, not sure that's the right like title for you, try again, come up with something brand new. It was always like I almost took it personally because I had come up with that title, but honestly they want you to do the best you can do, and if that means writing a new title, I was going to do it. So my next tip, and one of the reasons why I'm filming this now, is to start early. Now this obviously depends on the kind of person you are, but I would recommend starting early in your reading, your research, your essays, everything like that. Like at this point in time, if I was going into third year, second year, what have you, I would be writing out all my deadlines, looking through all my course books and everything like that, just to make sure that I knew what was coming, I knew when my deadlines were, and if I had like 3 deadlines on the same day, I was like well aware of that like months in advance, so I could prep my schedule for that. Now I know everyone's not necessarily an organised person. Some people like to live a little bit of a chaotic life, leave things till the last minute, which is totally fine, but I feel like as a student it kind of forces you to be organised anyway, because you have to work to a deadline and you have to hand things in on time. You have a timetable for your lectures, so why not have a timetable for your studying as well? I've actually done a whole video about how I made my study plan. I literally go through it step by step with you, so if you want to watch that, please feel free, because I think it's a great starting point and just something to base your schedule off of. Obviously everybody works different, so incorporate what you will, but definitely a good starting point. But yeah, I would always work backwards, so if I had a deadline in December, I would maybe start researching and reading for it in early November or maybe even mid-October or something, just so that I gave myself enough weeks where I could do it little and often, which I guess is another tip in itself. Again, everybody works differently, but I really found that doing 2 or 3 solid hours a day rather than like 12 hours the night before really helped me out and really just helped me understand the topic, and meant I had enough time to come back and edit over and over again, and even get the lecturer to proofread it if I could, which was always a good idea if you can. But yeah, it gave me way more time to edit it, check it on Grammarly and all these things that you don't necessarily have time to do when you're cramming it in last minute, and it just meant I could find so many articles and things like that. So doing it little and often really helped for me, and just meant that I could keep my social life with it, because if I did 3 hours of study a day, I still have a couple of hours for lectures. Maybe I go to work in the evening, but between that I maybe have 3 or 4 hours where I could see a friend or do an exercise or go for a walk or go out for dinner or something, do you know what I mean? So it just helped with my balance, which I do think is really important for a student's mental health, and definitely to kind of get the most out of being a student. Obviously studying is a huge part of it, but the social part is also equally important to me, so I wanted to make sure I had time for both. Then, as I mentioned before, researching is very important for all of your essays, and it really does make the difference to your grade, because you just have so much more of an in-depth knowledge about the subject that you're talking about, which I do think is really important. Obviously there's so many ways you can research. You can research online, you can do Google Scholar, you can do journal articles perhaps on your iLibrary if you have one with your university, or you can go to the library and do proper books if that's the way you prefer to do it. I like everything online because you submit your paper online, you write your paper online, so to me it was just made sense to have everything in the same medium, so I could just flip between everything rather than a paper here, a book here, a journal article here, and my laptop here. Just made more sense for me, but obviously do whatever works for you, and that only comes with practice and taking it over time. I usually found some research, I would copy and paste the journal articles into a separate Word document, so I literally had every journal article I'd ever read about the subject in one Word document, so when it came to writing my bibliography and everything like that, super easy to transfer across. And there is also software and different websites where you can do that super easily, at a click of a button. Then my next tip, and I think this is where the big bucks come in, definitely makes the difference, is critical thinking. Now obviously it's very easy for me to say oh, think critically, but putting that into practice is really difficult, and something I didn't really learn until third year. Second year I was very descriptive in my essays, just oh, this happened and this person thought this and this person thought this, but I never introduced what I thought, or why that person's thought wasn't good enough, or what they should have thought about instead, or why their argument was weak, all of these different critical things to consider. And there are many a website and many a blog post on different critical thinking sentence starters and ways to incorporate critical thinking pretty easily into your writing. But honestly, that's what it's about. University is all about teaching you and almost conditioning you to think in a different way, think critically about other people's work, so that you can introduce or propose something new that's never been thought of before. That's why people go to university, that's why people become scholars, to research and find something new. It's all about your dissertation, you're trying to prove something. So research is really important, and critical thinking comes hand in hand with that, because that's going to be what boosts you up to those higher grades. Like I said, it is something that comes with practice and is quite hard to wrap your brain around, especially if it's your first essay or what have you. So definitely see if your university offers any critical thinking workshops or anything like that, or whether you can find one of these websites with all the starter sentences. I think I used Manchester University's starter sentence website. If I can remember what it's called, I'll link it down below, because it was really handy, and my dissertation tutor actually recommended that to me. So maybe ask a lecturer, use your questions, ask a lecturer and see if they have any advice for you for your critical thinking as well. But yeah, it's definitely something that is really handy to boost your grade. My next tip is a bit of a hack, and definitely a way you can get some really easy grades, and it is your reference list. I always found that the more references I had, the higher the grade I had. Now I don't know whether that's tested and proven or whether that's just something I noticed, but I always find obviously the more references you have, the more research you've done, so the more you know about the topic, and the more contrasting and comparison opinions and thoughts and theories and things that you have to put together in your essay. So if you can get a nice long juicy reference list, definitely do. I think they say it should be 10% of the word count. Oh no, 1% of the word count? Basically, if you have a 4,000 word essay, you should have 40 references. Does that make sense? I don't know what percentage that is. Someone do the math. I didn't do a maths degree, so I don't need to. But something like that. 3,000 word essay, 30 references, just as a kind of base. So obviously for a 10,000 word dissertation, 100 references. Yikes, this is why you need to start early. But yeah, definitely have a good reference list, and definitely make sure it's written in your bibliography in the way it's supposed to. I know there's a lot of, I think there's 3 or 4, maybe 5 different ways that you can write a bibliography. I personally used Harvard referencing style, so just really research it, even check if your university has a guide to how they prefer it done, and check that with your lecturer, because I found that some lecturers like their Harvard referencing one way and another lecturer liked it another way, and obviously your lecturer is who's marking your paper. So basically do whatever they say to please them and get the high grades, but definitely check out your bibliography, because I think it's like maybe 5 or 10% in some of your essays, like just on the bibliography, so definitely easy marks. My next tip is a little cheeky and is not always possible, but if you can, if your lecturer is willing, send a draft email to that lecturer. Now obviously bear in mind the lecturer is very busy. They usually sometimes have their own stuff going on, sometimes they'll be studying for a PhD alongside, or they have like 1,000 other students apart from you, so bear that in mind, be patient. But if they are willing to accept a complete like final draft or complete draft, or whether they're willing to accept your first 100 words or first 1,000 words, whatever it is, definitely submit that to your lecturer. I really found over third year that was so helpful, not only in progressing my critical thinking, because they would ask me questions about certain parts which I hadn't even thought of, or just really highlighted some areas that I could expand on or like improve my critical thinking, but obviously if you're wavering off topic, or if some of it's irrelevant, or if you need like more resources, or you need to back up a sentence that you've said with a reference, they can point that out to you super easily, and they can just give you a little, I don't know, like reassurance that, yeah, it looks good, looks like you're on the wrong track, or looks like you could use some improvement, why don't we have a meeting? Just so that you have that little bit of extra support. I always think that it's really important to remember how much money you're spending on your degree, because even though it's something that's kind of scary and no one wants to think about because it's very expensive, I do think that money is going somewhere and you should get the value from that. So whether that's an extra hour of a lecturer's time, you've paid for it, love. Get that extra hour's time if you need it. If you need a lecturer to read over something, you've paid for it. Like, get them to read it over. I know that's kind of a weird way of thinking about it, like I guess a weird kind of sense of entitlement in some way, but I just think it's very easy to become very quiet as a student and just keep your head down and try as hard as you can independently, but you forget that there is a huge support system around you, and obviously these lecturers want you to do well, because not only does it make them look good, but the university then looks really good if all their students are getting high grades. So everyone's there to help you, they want you to do well. Obviously you want to do well if you're watching this video, so definitely ask some questions, get your research in early, and definitely get your lecturer to proof your essay if you can. Oh my gosh, I've spoken for so long. That's going to be it for this video. I really hope some of these tips have been useful. I know they were kind of quite quick and snappy and just thrown right at you, so I will leave a list of all my tips down below, but if you do have any questions like specifically about any of the tips that I've given, please feel free to head over to my Instagram to DM me on there, because I'm pretty good at responding, or feel free to leave them down below and we can start a whole conversation down there with all the other viewers, just to let them know what you're thinking, because like I said, if you have a question, it's likely that someone else watching this video might have the same question, so you're helping them out by asking. But yeah, if you have liked this video, please hit the thumbs up and go ahead and subscribe down below, and hopefully I'll see you very soon. Bye!